Hi, I'm Kevin Hill, and today we're going to talk about a problem that's affecting this MTH engine that we have here. This is a O-gauge 3-rail MTH locomotive that would run on any O-gauge layout, Lionel, MTH, what have you, and it has a problem. When I got this engine, it didn't run right. It was acting like the decoder was burned out, and I thought that I was going to have to replace the whole board in the engine. But in doing some research, I was happy to find that that was not the case. These engines actually have a small rechargeable battery in them that if the battery no longer holds a charge, the engine will act like that. Now, I don't typically run O-gauge, so this wasn't something that I really knew about. And if you're a typical end user like me, and you just kind of skim the manual, maybe you don't know about it either. I have a friend that runs MTH engines exclusively on his layout, and he didn't know about it when I told him. So maybe this will help you out. I should mention that this problem only affects locomotives that have the Protosound 1 or Protosound 2 boards in them. If your locomotive has Protosound 3, it won't have a battery in it. So this engine is an NW2 that has Protosound 1. It was produced probably sometime around 1998. So this one does have a battery in it. And I'll show you what the engine does right now with the dead battery in there. I'm going to power up the track. And you can see it kind of sounds a little garbled. I'll try to change the direction. It's not doing anything, it's just sitting there. You can't blow the horn and you can't ring the bell. It just kind of sits there with the sound on. So that's the problem that we're having with this locomotive here today. So this next part is going to vary based on your locomotive. On this locomotive, the battery is under the fuel tank. On the steam locomotives, it's usually in the tender, but you're going to want to consult your manual on this to figure out where the battery actually is. So I'm just going to remove these screws here and take the fuel tank off. And there is our battery. And as you can see, it's just like a regular 9-volt battery here. Or actually, I should say it's not. It looks like a 9-volt battery. This is something else that I learned when I dug into this. If you're like me, you would think that a rechargeable 9-volt battery is a rechargeable 9-volt battery, but that's not always the case. These batteries range in voltages from 8.2 all the way to 9 volts. Now, they say that these engines run fine with a 9-volt battery in there, but you probably want to stay as close to the factory voltage as possible. So there are a few companies that make 8.4 volt batteries, which is what this engine has in it, and all the MTH engines have. So these are a couple of batteries that I brought with me here today. One is the factory MTH battery, and the other is a battery made by Energizer that both meet the specs for this locomotive. They're 8.4 volt rechargeable batteries. If you're not going to use the MTH battery, you need to look at the small print on the battery packaging, because if you look at this Energizer package here, it says 9 volt up here in the corner, but if you look at the small print down here, it says 8.4 volts. So that's what you're looking for. That's the optimal battery for this application. So I'm going to be putting the MTH battery in this engine today. An important note on these is that the batteries do not come pre-charged. Now, I charged this battery before I came today in a portable charger that plugs into the wall. But if you don't have a charger, you can install the battery in the locomotive and let it sit on a piece of track in neutral with the sound running and everything for about 3 to 4 hours, and it'll charge the battery that way. Now that we have the engine open, you can see that it's just as simple as putting a battery in your smoke detector here. You just connect it in, and it's ready to go. Now, the original battery had some foam tape on the back of it here, so I'm going to go ahead and add some of that as well. I have this double-sided foam tape here. So I'll just kind of cut a piece to fit. And we'll put it on the back of the battery here. That's pretty good. And then you just stick the battery back in the hole here. Get your fuel tank back on. So that's really all there is to it. Now we're ready to test the locomotive. So I'm going to apply some voltage to the track here. And we hear the engine startup sounds. Now, as I mentioned before, if you don't have a battery charger that plugs into the wall, this would be the point where you just let the engine sit like this for 3 to 4 hours and it'll charge the battery for you. So now I'm going to lower the voltage a little bit so this thing doesn't run off the end of the table. And I'm going to press the direction button. And the engine starts to roll. We'll go back the other way. So as you can see, it runs now. So that's really all there is to it. As you can see, we took a locomotive that didn't run, and now it runs, and that could save you a lot of headaches. I was ready to write this engine off as thinking that it had a burned out decoder in it, but just changing the battery fixed that problem for me. Now, something of note, if you suspect that this is the problem in your locomotive, you can put a regular alkaline 9-volt battery in here and just test it. Don't run the engine like that, but test it for a few seconds just to see if it'll run back and forth with that battery in it. And then turn it off, take the battery out, because if you run it prolonged like that, you can damage the charging circuit in the locomotive. The earlier print versions of the manuals actually said, yes, you can do that. And then in the later printed version, they changed it to, no, don't do this. So I'm thinking that people were just leaving them in there. So don't do that. I hope it helps you out with your hobby and you have some enjoyment with your toy trains.